Well, its economy may not be among the biggest, but Sweden is now the second most competitive country in the world. And while most countries are worrying about the lack of consumer spending, Sweden has been seeing a surge. Well, joining me now is the Swedish Finance Minister, Anders Borg. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for braving the cold. Minister, there's so much talk about actually what Europe can do, if it's doing the right thing. I know you were, for example, very vocal about the bankers in the past. And last year in Davos, they came here asking the regulators and politicians not to punish them too much. This year, they're pretty smug walking around. Did they get away with it?
Well, I think for our case, for example, we are pretty much out of the crisis. So we are now thinking of what we can do to strengthen the framework, because we will not accept the banks to take the same risks in the future as they have done in the past. So we are now in Switzerland, and they have raised the capital requirement quite dramatically for systemic banks. And it doesn't seem like the equity price of UBS has been damaged by that.
In terms of what Sweden is doing, I mean, it's a lot healthier than most of its European counterparts. You have good growth. In terms of structural reform, it may not, sound very inviting, but is this the key to long-term growth?
Well, I mean, our growth numbers are currently running at around 7% year on year, and are quite likely to accelerate substantially from that level in the later part of this year, or later part of last year, the fourth quarter. So, yeah, I think a large degree of that is due to structural reforms. We've done quite a lot of reforms on the labour market to reinforce the driving forces to work, and I think that is a key issue. And it's also quite obvious that if you want to do a fiscal restructuring, you need to cut back spending, and it's better that you cut back spending such as unemployment benefits that also reinforce the growth rather than education.
Now, on exports, it's interesting. If we see Davos as a little microcosm of what's going on in the world, we have a lot of emerging economies. They're the ones that are growing. Is there a necessity now for the European Union countries to stop trading amongst themselves and really focus on the emerging markets?
Well, our export numbers now to Russia is, I think in November they hit 100% increase year on year, and we have some numbers, I think it is 30 or 40% in the export growth to China. So obviously the emerging economies is a lot of the driving force for all of the economies. I think Europe need to refocus to be much more tough on fiscal policy and do a lot more on structural reforms. I mean, we have been starting out, but I think there's a way to go for some of the countries.
We've spoken to a lot of EU officials here saying we will stand together to defend the euro and the Eurozone. What are you expecting from the package that they're discussing at the moment? Does it need to be really that shock and awe that the markets are waiting for?
Well, it needs to have two components. One component is that we stand together. Another component is that the countries that are in trouble do more themselves. We need to see more fiscal measures from countries such as Spain and Portugal. I think it would be very naive to think that a fiscal restructuring process would be ended in 2011 and 12. This is something that will go on for at least the next 5 or 6 years.
Anders Borg, thank you so much. The Swedish Finance Minister there speaking to us, just one of the many finance ministers that we've been speaking to here in Davos.